And we are live.
We are live.
We are back for
Seems
another
to be
yarn.
happening
Yes.
with a video with no name.
Yeah, no name.
No name.
Names it is.
Today we're talking about names. Alleged names, supposed and associated names. Some would say trade names,
Some might say that, yes.
being a name that is fabricated and used but not owned personally. Today we're talking about the birth name and specifically the birth certificate, or more correctly titled the registration certificate, birth being B-E-R-T-H, not B-I-R-T-H, and we'll talk about that a bit more for that to make a bit more sense. But it's a pretty good topic because most people don't even give a second thought to their name. And someone goes, "What's your name?" And you go, "This is my name." But like, if we just took a moment and paused about that and go, well, hang on, let me just decide why is this my name? And so, how did you get your name? Like, where did it come from? Did you choose it? I don't know many people that chose their name. Maybe renamed, but not the original one, not on your birth certificate. Like, you were named by another person. And so therefore, does that make it yours? And more importantly, does that make it you? Like, is that you? Because it being yours is different to you. It's what you identify with versus something potentially in your possession or having operational control over. And they're two pretty different things. And a lot of people wouldn't realise that, or haven't given a lot of thought to the fact that it's not theirs, it's not them. It's just a name of association. And so to be called Dylan, to be called anything, you could be called anything, and anyone can call you anything, but does that make it you or yours?
That is the question.
And people might think it's a bit semantics and, well, it's all a bit stupid, it's a bit kind of splitting hairs, but when we're in a common space, common law space, it's really not. It's the defining moment in the subtleties of that language. And to understand that our birth certificate is really just a registration of a name. But is that what a birth certificate should be? Is it a name registration document, or is it the record of a living birth? Because I would imagine a birth certificate should be the record of a living birth.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you?
Yes, you would.
And that's where the deception might come in.
Indeed, because that is not the function of that document.
Absolutely not.
Yes, and most people would not be aware of that. So we're going to talk about that a bit today, just to clarify for people and just to give a bit of something to chew on for a while and consider our relationship with what we believe to be our name and whether it is ours or whether it is us, because that's very different. What's your name?
What is my name?
Do you have a name?
Hearsay.
Hearsay. So I could call you anything, really. You know?
Well,
Could call you tree, could call you anything.
you could. They're all just names.
They're all just words. Yeah.
They are. Yeah.
Yep. So how does one know their name? Like, are you the name? Is the name yours that you've been given?
Well, the thing is, like we were sort of touching on last week, you can never be a name. You can't be a name. It's not possible. You can only be a living man or woman. That's it. A name is a name. A name doesn't live. So you can't be a name. You can use a name, like Dylan John. But
So
that
it's
was
a trading word. It's an operational word, more than an identity.
yeah.
And you have to make it your identity, don't you? Like, you have to assume it in the first person to make it that. Because in and of itself, it's not that. It really is just a word and an association at best. And this is where we get into what is called joinder. And joinder is essentially, in common law, the way that we connect to and relate to that name, and whether we operate the name and use the name as something that is ours, as different to it being us in the living status. Yes, that is me. As different to, yes, that is my name. And in common law and in any legal circles, that is the difference. That is the world of difference. Because joinder is identifying in the first person with that name and saying, no, that isn't me, that is me, that is who I am. And I guess the learning that we've been going through for a while, and a lot of other people are starting to uncover now, is that in legal circles, as different to common law, as they are not related on any level, in legal space and legal jurisdiction, it is only your name that lives within that jurisdiction, because that jurisdiction is a dead one. There's nothing flesh and blood and bone in that space. It's all administration, it's all business, it's all made up. And so everything within it essentially is conceptual, it's ideological, but there's no heartbeat in it. And so anything legal really is for the purpose of operating, for the purpose of association. It's like a business name. You know, might be a living man or woman behind it, but the business itself is not a living entity. And that's the thing with our name. Our name is the same, and we don't quite get that. It's not us, it is ours, and it is ours to utilise in that legal space.
Definitely, yeah.
Big revelation for people when you start really getting into it and just thinking about it a bit. Because I don't know about you, but like, I don't have a name.
Don't have one.
When would I? The only way I would know I had a name is if I knew it in my heart, which I might say is my God-given name, because that's the way I know what God has given me, that my heart says it's true and it's a yes or a no. And so I would know it, but I wouldn't identify with it. Does that make sense? Like if it's you, you wouldn't identify with it because it's you. Because to identify means to something else, like an association with. And I don't have a God-given name. I have a human-given name, a mum and dad-given name, but that's only an association. And it is up to me to identify with it or even associate with it. And I can de-associate with it, but I've never identified with it. So, no, can't help you. I don't have a name, and like you said, it's really just hearsay, you know. Someone wants to call me that name, or call me any name, call me anything at all. Been called lots of things, but it doesn't mean I am that thing. But I would have to agree to be that thing for that name, for that title, and all that implies to come into effect. And so in legal space, for example, you get in any sort of trouble with the police or courts or any kind of shenanigans, any kind of false authority, what's the first thing they ask you? What's the first thing they want to know about you?
Yeah, what's your name?
What's your name?
Date of birth.
Got some ID?
Yeah.
Yeah? And that's joinder in a nutshell, isn't it?
Straight away, like that.
And that is why, straight away, it's the first and most pressing thing they ask you. Because you, the living man, flesh and blood and bone, you're alive, you're not in that dead jurisdiction. And so for them who are in a dead jurisdiction, being corporate, being business, the only way they can really speak to you is through your dead association, your dead representation, or your fiction, which is your name, because beyond your name, you're living. And so they need you to join to that word. And then by virtue of that, everything that is in that word or associated with it then comes onto you. But only via consent, like because you've joined with it, you then agree that all the consequences or penalties are then to you too. But it's a pretty big deal to understand that that starts and ends with that word, with that operational name, and that you, the living being, are in an entirely separate jurisdiction, and one that precedes and is above the legal and even common law jurisdictions, that within your natural state and within your creator-given state, you are whole and as is, and you don't have any of that stuff. It's working tools, it's operational, it's administrative. And so to start disassociating from our name is a pretty healthy thing to do, and starting to just think about this conversation, whether you think it's just nonsense or whether you can kind of click on to what we're talking about, like it's really worth giving it a bit of objective time to really feel into your relationship with that word that you're called and say, is it mine or am I that? How deeply with it are you? Because the minute you say it's you, then you will basically receive any consequences that are attached to that name. And you'd be getting in any trouble with false authority. They aren't interested in you, they're interested in your name.
It's all on the name. That's all that it's pinned to. That's it.
It's pretty clever.
It is clever.
Yep.
You got to give him that.
It's very deceptive.
That's the whole thing. It is a great deception. Like, and that's from birth. You're told that this is who you are. You are like Byron Mulligan or Dylan Passmore. And like I was saying last week, all of my life, I thought I am. Like that's me. I am the name.
I am. No third word.
Yeah, but
I am.
then all of a sudden you learn that the name is literally just registered to this corporation, and the reason for that is because, like you're saying, that corporation doesn't have life. It's a dead world.
It's a fictitious
It's
entity.
fictitious.
Made up by us.
And for any sort of a corporation or a business to deal with a living man or woman, they have to deal with the person, and they have to join, the man or woman has to join to the name so they can do business. Well, you don't have to join to it, you can use it as a tool, but that's the trap, is knowing that or not.
That's right. And using it and not being it.
Not being it. The disassociation is the key. An example, I was talking to an old mate last night, and I gave him just an example of how joinder would apply with a driver license. Say, police officer has your driver license. Is this you? Well, no. Well, what do you mean? That looks like you. There might be a photo that looks like me, but that's not me.
Maybe that's true.
It's
hearsay.
That's a bit of plastic, mate. That's not me.
That is it.
I'm me. I'm the living man. That's a bit of plastic with a name on it.
And again, it might seem like semantics to some people, and some people might not understand quite what we're talking about. You know, if someone produces a license with photo ID on it and say, "Is that you?" and you go, "Nope," like, it might seem a bit silly or even a bit of a cheeky answer, you know. But if you just stop and get objective about it, like, what are they referring to? They're referring to the bit of plastic with a photo, asking, "Is that you?" They're not saying, "Is that a likeness of you? Is this you?" No, I'm me. I'm not a bit of plastic with an image. It looks like you. Okay. Can't really help you with that either. You know, like, that really is hearsay. You know, this is your name. I've heard this name before. I've heard people call you that name. Okay. Does that make it you? It all comes back to consent, and at some point they're really trying to force you to say, "Yes, that is me." But you don't have to. Yeah, it's just the pressure to join you to that word, to join you to that name. And it is via those associations and threats. But at some point, you need to consent to the association. They're really just being projected onto you until you agree. And to understand that the living man and women is in its own realm, our own jurisdiction, and that the name that we have been given is not in the same jurisdiction as us. It is in the legal jurisdiction, not in the living. And that neither of those can speak to each other. Only living men and women can speak to each other, and only fictitious entities can speak to each other. But you can't talk to a corporation because it can't speak to you. You know, it's the dead front for a living man. Like I said, when someone registers a business, the ultimate way to protect yourself is to register yourself a business and wrap yourself in policies, procedures, terms and conditions. And that way people are always associating with you but never touching you, the living man. And so that's just a clever kind of reverse engineered way of doing the same thing we're talking about. It's having a name front. And in truth, all of our names are simply a name front. And to say that that is you is a big deal for consent, and that it's not really true. It's never actually been true. And again, in contract law, to understand that that registered name is for operational use. Once you disassociate from that name, you then have more capacity to operationally use that word for your own benefit and to not have it used against you. But that can only be done through identification with it. The clearer you are of any word that people call you, no one can touch your living status. And that's a pretty big deal to digest and really get. And then to apply if you get pulled over or get asked for ID, and to feel and to observe exactly why they pressure you so much for that name and that ID. And it is a good test to see just how far police or other corporate authorities will go to get you to agree to being that name before they proceed with anything. And it really is true time and time again that the minute you start you take this angle, they don't dig that.
Not at all, and they will push it. I've been in situations where they push it and they use any sort of intimidation or standover or fear tactics that they have to use to get you to joinder to the name.
Yep, because they really can't talk to the name or associate any sort of a penalty or fee with the name unless you make it alive, unless you animate it for them. If you choose not to do that, there's really nothing. It is the bridge for all of the penalties and all of the things they're trying to impose on you. If you don't want to cross that bridge, the bridge is that name. And so you simply stay on your side of it. And yes, you're right, it definitely antagonises and it definitely pisses people off when they would assume that you're just going to say yes.
Yeah, they don't like it, I can tell you.
That is true, they don't like it.
Because they can't get you.
That is right.
So as soon as they can't get you, they're not happy about it.
That is right.
You've just taken away any assumed authority or power that they think that they have. Because literally, they can't have any authority over you. I think I said it last week, the only time anyone can have authority over you is if you've committed a crime, if you've actually caused harm or loss. And then, well, there might be a warrant out for your arrest or whatever, but that's a legitimate crime. If you've committed something criminal,
yes,
where you've caused harm or loss, different story.
And
but
that's between two living men. Only harm or loss can really occur between two living men. Yes, like there has to be an accuser, and the accuser has to have a heartbeat and a voice to make that accusation. And so that is a genuine crime, and common law will always recognise that. That's where your conscience comes into play. It's where natural law comes into play. Even your heart can tell you you've done the wrong thing. And that's just a crime in natural jurisdiction when you know you've fucked up. You know you've done the wrong thing. But to be accused anywhere beyond that, it's really false.
Yeah, as for any other victimless crimes, that's what it requires, is the joinder for you to cop the fine or whatever it might be. You literally have to joinder yourself to the name because that's all they've got, and they can't have authority over the living because it goes back to the hierarchy of laws. The creator, men and women, and then we create government, and then government has created business. And then there's underneath all of that, there's persons, there's citizens, there's residents. And by you joining yourself to be a person or a citizen or a resident or anything like that, well then you've just lost your living status. As soon as you've joined yourself to it and you've subjected yourself in Australia to more than 7 million statute laws. 7 million.
Simply by identifying with your name.
Straight away, that easy. Just by saying you are a name.
And by not doing that, you haven't.
You haven't, exactly. Yeah.
What a big thing to get.
Isn't
Simply
it?
to stay in your living status and to not associate with. And the minute you associate with, you're entering a false realm, a fictitious realm. And that's the realm we're talking about. We're talking about maritime law. We're talking about contract law as different to common law. And this is where common law really does come into its own for people's learning, because common law is simply the way living men and women engage with each other under the Creator. It's the way all of us on the same bit of land with the same conscience in our hearts of right and wrong go, this is how we can express and work together in a collaborative way while maintaining that state of rightness, maintaining that sense of rightness between us. And if there is ever a wrong done between us, we can work it out. And if we can't work it out, it can be worked out with us and for us, not around us or over us. And that's where the court system now has just got it completely wrong, because you're guilty until proven innocent. It's already got you. that's not the way it was ever meant to be, and that's not really the way it was for a very long time. It's just moving more and more in that direction now, and people are starting to wake up to that fact now that corporation has taken over our world, and that every organisation, absolutely anywhere, once they are a registered business, they have changed their functional status. What used to be a government, a police, any of the systems that we know now, the systems of supposed authority, they were not registered businesses 50 plus years ago, and that has made all the difference, and it happened very quietly in the background as people didn't realise why suddenly social services like governments and policing and so forth became administrative and started fining you and feeing you and charging you and all of and penalising you for God knows what. Never used to be that way, you know, and it can't be that way in common law because none of those systems are above us. They answer to us, you know, the living men and women our creations are always below us. And that includes everything, all legislation, all statutes, even common law is below us. It has to support our creator given rights, otherwise we scrap it and start again. If someone wants to be tyrannical about it, we scrap them and start again. You can't, no creation ever goes above the creator, and that includes for us too. No man is ever above God, and nothing we do can ever be put above us or each other. And the minute it does, it gets lopped off. And we've truly forgotten that now, you know. We've put contract law in that realm completely over our heads and not realise that it should be completely beneath our feet. It has no power or authority over us whatsoever because it is our creation. We can recreate it. It is not an entity unto itself. Only those with vested interest in that sort of power would have us believe that, to keep us isolated and alone and a bit unsure, a bit anxious about the whole business. But it doesn't take a lot of learning, just a little bit here and there, and you start to cotton on, the seeds get planted, and suddenly the awareness sprouts that I am more than this, and this is all wrong, so how can that be right? Should I comply to it? How is it being done? You know, what's the key to understanding and recognising all of this nonsense? And the name, the legal name, is really the first place to start, because everything carries on from that, doesn't it?
Mm.
You know, your driver's licence, which is your next primary contract into nonsense, that's based on you having a registration certificate from birth. Like if you didn't have that, you wouldn't get your driver's licence, and that entails a whole other bunch of problems. But it's all founded on the same original source problem, and that is the registration of your name.
That's it. That's where it comes from.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realise also is that the name registration, what we believe is our birth certificate, is not a certificate as a record of your birth. It has a bit of those details on it, but that is not the true function of that document. That document's function is to register your name as an entity within maritime law and within that space that can be used as an entity. There is actually a source document which is a birth certificate or a source document of a live birth, a record of a live birth, but that sits behind that registration. That your birth certificate, as is commonly known, is a secondary document created from that primary document, which most people never ever see and would never know that it exists. They think the one they've got is their birth record. But it doesn't take much to find your live birth record. Quick call to births, deaths and marriages, getting on the phone to common law and a couple of others, and actually getting your live birth record, it's not unachievable. And then to recognise that there is a second document shows you that the birth certificate as we know it is not what we thought it was. It really is something entirely different. And then the research starts to go, well, what is this? If it's not really a record of my birth, what is the function of this document? What does it do? And it binds us, it joins us to a fictitious space where the legal realm reigns supreme.
And some people might call that the straw man or the legal fiction.
That is it.
Because that's what it is, essentially.
That's what we're referring
fiction.
to. Yep,
it's made up. It's funny, you know, before I started learning about this stuff, about the fraud behind the birth certificate, I remember a couple of years ago, I had this thought, and it was, I had to use the birth certificate for something, and I just thought to myself, why do we need a birth certificate to prove that I was born? What's this even all about? Like, I'm here. I'm obviously alive. I was obviously born. Why do we need a certificate? So,
It's a fair question when you really stop and think about it, eh?
so to actually like start learning about the fraud behind it and how it binds you into contracts with the corporation once you joined it to it, it wasn't really that big of a shock. It actually started making sense because I already had that thought of like, why do we need this in the first place? And a lot of things for anything to do with the so-called government, the corporation, you'll need the either the birth certificate or a driver's license as your ID. And it's all joinder. All of it.
Passport, same deal.
Yep.
Wouldn't get a passport without your birth certificate. If you didn't have a name, you wouldn't get that document either. And it's all the same. It's all joinder. Any one of those documents is designed to get you into trouble, not to give you any kind of access, you know. That's just the illusion of what it does. But it holds you in that illusionary space. And if you don't know, it's the nature of an illusion. You don't know you're in it until you do. It's not obvious that you're in a land of nonsense. Like, it's real until it's not. And then by virtue of it being an illusion, the minute you see through it, it disappears because it's not an illusion anymore once you've got the Dakota Key, once you've seen through it. And then you can't really ever go back to it. You can't go back into that illusionary way of perceiving things. It is simply false.
Yeah, well, that's true. Like, once you see it for what it is, you can never unsee it. And that's why the corporation right now is in dire straits, because there's so many of us that are out here talking about it now and pointing it out saying, look, man, this is all a fraud. What you're doing is all fraudulent.
Yep.
Everything, all of your contracts, they're all undisclosed. There's no full disclosure to what they're all about. They're totally fraudulent.
And they are based on that
nature.
name. And they're all based on that original document.
Yeah.
If you didn't have one of those, you wouldn't have gotten to the next stages of that. And so none of them can be valid. They're all fraudulent because they started from a completely fraudulent place.
Yeah. If there's no full disclosure, like a contract can't be legitimate.
Yep.
It can't be because it requires two people to agree to it.
Yep.
Knowingly.
And on day
And
one,
knowingly agreeing to what the contract is about.
Yep.
If there's not full disclosure, well, it's a fraud.
I didn't agree to that name. Again, it seems a bit silly, but when you're in contract law, like, age isn't really a matter of that. All individuals are individual units within the contract space, and if I didn't consent knowingly to that contract, to that agreement, it's not valid. And it doesn't really matter whether I was one day old or not. If there was no consensual awareness and agreement of that name, then it is association. It is not a valid contract because there's not dual consent. It is imposed. And so talking about it in these terms, like, it starts to become a bit clearer, and you can start to see with an open mind that there really is a massive distinction between you and that word. It really is hearsay. It really is only association that you must agree to associate with. But it doesn't come with good stuff. It comes with complexity. It comes with pressure. It comes with all sorts of drama, and is to keep you in that state. But the name is the bridge. And yeah, to really get that enables people to be free and to free themselves from everything that they've subsequently been tied into. It's worth considering as well that obviously a name is a word, it's language, and it's proprietary, which means once something is registered, that word, that document, that label is copyright material because it is now owned by someone. That registration certificate was registered by someone, and so therefore they own the contents of that language, they own that name. And copyright's pretty simple. You're not allowed to plagiarise or illegally use anyone else's owned material without explicit permission. I haven't requested permission to use my name as it is known by me, and therefore it is still belonging to someone else. And therefore it's pretty clearly illegal for me to use that word that I am known by. Because if it is not me and it's not even mine, get in big trouble with that. And that's why it is truly legal birth fraud, because it is not your name. You are committing fraud every single time that you identify or utilise that name without taking commercial control of it, because it ain't yours.
Because that name has been registered.
And not to you.
Yeah.
Can't use someone else's material. And so that's really your first step to recognising that it's time to start disconnecting, that you actually don't want to have anything to do with that name until you can start reconveying your mind and your own kind of political and legal status to then re-own and re-operate that word, but from your own natural jurisdiction, to where you are no longer saying I am that name, but that name is mine in terms of a tool, in terms of a function that I may use, in terms of a possession or something that I own. But that's not saying that it's me. To own something gives you proprietary ownership of it. It's not an identity in any way. And so this language is very important to start to catch, and for people to start to learn and to catch the language that we use when we start identifying with that name, and to say, is it mine or is it me? They are not the same thing. And to recognise that name might be yours, but if someone goes, is this your name? No. I represent the name. It's just like someone saying, is this business yours? I represent the business. Is this business you? No, you can't be a business. You can have a business, and that business could have that name on it. But is it you? Like, is there a heartbeat in that entity? Is it your heartbeat? It's obviously not you.
Obviously not. And another thing worth pointing out is really the real poison is the glossa when it comes down to written language. So this is one that'll make it obvious for people to see right in front of their faces, is if people pick up their driver licenses or their birth certificate or anything like a bank card or anything like that, you'll see the dogged Latin, which is all uppercase text, and that has no jurisdiction with actual true English, because English is descriptive text. So there's nowhere in the English language where there's all capital letters. It doesn't exist. So, and another part of the fraud is the surname being in all capital letters, joining that to your given name. So Dylan John, my given name, and then there's Passmore, if you look on the birth certificate, all in capital letters. They're obviously two different names. It says it right there. If you really look at it, they're two different names.
And that's true. All official documentation has your name in all caps. Anything from a government, anything from a department, it's always in all caps. And people don't give that a second thought, do they? Because they just look at the words and go, yep, that's the name. But look at how it's written. And the way it's written can mean everything. It's not semantics. Like, it really is the difference between two whole realms. And that your name was never like that. That word was never like that. It has been created in that format. And things are only formatted for a particular purpose.
It's literally a sign. It is a sign. It's not a language. If you look at the dogged text, it can only be a sign. And you can't join Dylan John with Passmore if Passmore is just a sign, because it's not a language. It's not a proper, legitimate language. There's no basis behind it. It's another fraud. And it's one for people to just simply open up their wallet and look at it, and it'll slap you straight in the face. Because, bang, there it is. You can see it. Once that's pointed out to you, you look at it and go, whoa, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, right. There's no jurisdiction between the two languages, between a sign and English language.
What else do you see on your driver's license apart from your name typed in all caps? Your signature. It's the agreement to that. It's your consent that that is true. Difference between a signature and an autograph. Difference between the signature and an associated name or a trading name. And this is another real key one in written form, that any form of a signature is that first person consent. You're consenting to anything that is written in that way. There are ways to refer to your name, and in the sense that it is my name, it is my trading name, I own it, I use it, but it is not me. And there are ways to autograph your own operational name in that way while staying disassociated from it. And it's worth people having a bit of time researching that, and it doesn't take much to find it. There's loads of information in terms of how to really address that written name properly. And that once you start changing that around and you're no longer working with a signature, it can make all the world of difference. And it certainly confuses a lot of people in official spaces because they don't see it too often. But that's really part of the key. Once the learning and the leadership is there, it is for educational purposes for other people to say, is this your name? What is this? And you go, let me tell you. Let me tell you, because it's not me, by the way, but yeah, I own that name. I own the rights to the name. I have operational use of the name. I can have legal use of the name, but it is not my identity. I don't identify with it. And yeah, that's really key, because all of the bad stuff sits on that name and identification with the name. But of course, you still want to do business with people during your day. You still want to trade. You still want to engage and engage in services in some way. And so there's still times where you will need to have a trading name. You will need to have some representation in the legal space to engage with other legal or living entities. You still need to sort of engage with other living men and women, and even other businesses, even other corporations. But you never do it from within that jurisdiction. You stay nice and clear in your living status and you don't leave it. And so to stay in it means relanguaging and learning how to relanguage the way you express yourself, the way you identify yourself, and what you identify with. So I'd encourage people to have a bit of a look into the ways to effectively and appropriately autograph any document, because structurally it is very, very different to what is just a traditional signature, and it does disassociate you from that name while reserving all of your rights and rights over that title. The copyright thing is a really big deal. It's worth looking into that before you start just kind of using it, because you can get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's right. And if you do have to sign something, make sure to reserve all of your rights. Always. If you go into anything, all rights reserved.
All rights reserved.
Every time.
It's probably worth, if we get this video online anywhere, just to put a little post underneath that in the comments, just to show people exactly how you would effectively autograph. It's very simple, and to really look at it and give it some time shows you in the way that it is structured or formatted that it is a name that is being used or represented, that it's not a personal identification. So we'll just attach a bit of info with this video wherever it happens to go, just to be able to show people and give you a starting point between the signature and the autograph. It's very important to start getting some of these techniques and understandings moving, so you can start disassociating from that realm. And the realm we're talking about, the jurisdiction we're talking about, is contract law. We're talking maritime law, as different to our natural or common standing. The more we start recognising our true jurisdiction, the more we can see other realms or jurisdictions for what they are. It's just true that common law, contract law is an illusionary space. It is a fictitious and dead space that we engage in, day out, and don't realise we are, and don't realise that we don't have to, and really don't realise that we don't exist in it. It's not actually real or true for any of us. We're doing it in a very hoodwinked kind of way. We don't realise that we're doing it and are encouraged to stay asleep in that way.
Yeah. A thing worth mentioning is the Roman civil law as well. Like that's when it comes down to it, that's probably the most the poison in all of it is the Roman civil law. They kind of hijacked contract law in a way, because contract law will still always have its part, no matter, like, because it's the rules of equity in a way. We've still got to be equitable in all dealings. So contracts will always be around. They always have been. And for example, like an easy one, old Joe Blow down the road, he's got a carton of eggs. He's offering me this carton of eggs, and I've got, $5. We agree to do an exchange. That's really a contract. So even in common law, there's still going to be contracts. But the thing that really has hijacked it is a Roman civil law. And, that's probably something that we can go into further on.
It goes beyond agreement, doesn't it? It goes beyond an agreement between two men. And a contract, again, it sounds a bit semantical, but it's really not. They're not related in any way. And an agreement or an understanding that we have between us is a form of contract, but in two different jurisdictions, they're not related in any way. An agreement in common law has nothing to do with a contract in maritime law, because they're designed for different functions. Like common law is about all of us on the one piece of land under God and how we operate as one collaborative being for our well-being with our conscience intact. And so there's all of us. You and me are the same but different. Same bit of land, same rules, same space, same trajectory. But at some point, like trade went over the water and we started dealing internationally. And so now there is all of us and the law of us, which is common law, which is now extended to the law of us and them, because now we're meeting thems. And so trade and international trade is what really covered all of this over and has spread water right across the land, because the law of contracts is the law of equity. It's terms and conditions when you're dealing with someone that you don't know. And common law is really only ever dealing with someone that you do know. And so you're all effectively following the same laws and you know it, and you have all agreed to that. But maritime law introduced the idea of a universal law of engagement, which says that everyone on a particular piece of land may be very clear on what the laws of that land are, and so everyone effectively knows and follows that. But you can't assume that men and women of another land do the same thing. So when dealing internationally, when dealing with people from another country, there has to be some universal terms of engagement that no matter who you are or who you're talking to, there is a common basis of understanding, a common basis of agreeing with people that maybe don't even speak your same language. Like, what's the universal way of dealing with them, between us and them? And this is the difference between understanding and contract. Contract law, maritime law, is that created terms of engagement between an us and a them kind of a deal. But it has nothing to do with common law. It's completely different. And it's manipulatable where common law is not manipulatable. It's always done by referendum. It's done by consensus because it's for us. It's our law. It's for the one us. And so you can't just change it within us. We all have to agree to change it to serve us. Universal laws like that are rife with danger, because who created them for a start, and why did they create them? And obviously they were created for trade. They were created with an industry bias. It wasn't about men and women's relationships to each other. It wasn't about spiritual growth under God. It was about trade. It was about business. And all of that's fair enough. And that maybe you at some point do need some universal understandings of global trade which wouldn't look like common law. But to recognise that that is a fictitious realm that has been made up maybe for our benefit, but who made it up? Where did it come from? And more specifically, who steers it now? Who influences that realm of trade now? And it blows most people's minds to realise that that particular realm has gone over all pieces of land in the world now, and it's not just maritime law, it's not just the law of the sea, it's the law of our planet, because it is being controlled to be that way. And the folks with industrial interest, more than living interest, have made sure that that particular realm of jurisdiction has influenced every part of our day, every way we interact. And so now we'll talk to another living man or woman, we'll talk to an organisation up the road or whatever, And it's all based on maritime law now. It's all based on contractual agreements, on universality of me and you, as in like us and them, not just us, not the one law of us. And that has been hijacked and poisoned dramatically over decades and hundreds of years. And it's right in front of our faces, but it's invisible. And again, in Australia and for most countries, it's when organisations began to register as corporations. It's when any group of us within the one us decide to get together and formalise us to talk to a formal other mob. You know, it creates power plays and imbalances that are not true. They're all just made up. And so once you start doing that and you register your entity as a business, you change jurisdiction. You're no longer working within and for other people. You're working for business. You're working for the terms and conditions. And it doesn't take much to think about that now and realise that's every dealing every day, even with people up the road and people that we know. We're effectively using international trade terms and agreements to deal with everybody. Never used to be that way. It wasn't that way. It's become that way in Australia for the last 50 years or so. All of this started in the early 70s for us in this country.
73.
Yep, potentially other countries earlier, I don't know, but in Australia it's been going 50 years, man. It's a long time.
Yeah.
And we don't realise it, because when the Australian government was registered as a corporation in 1973, on the US Securities and Exchange, Stock Exchange, like people don't realise that also, that changes what you believe to be a government into a business. And there is a world of difference in a government and a business. It's in our constitution and simply in your common sense that any government, any type governmental body can't be a for-profit business. You simply can't be for people and for profit at the same time. It is impossible, it is unconstitutional, and it doesn't make sense. And so over the last 50 years, we've seen police forces, we've seen governments, we've seen all sorts of social services that have been created by us, for us, to serve people, taking on whole levels of authority and autonomy that are false. And we don't quite understand now where the policemen and women went, and now we have police officers. All governments, one day they were dressed in a suit working for the people, and the next day they were dressed in a suit apparently still working for the people. But it all changed the minute they registered as a business. The minute you register as a corporation, you have different rules, you have different terms and conditions, and you are no longer ruled by us. You are autonomous in the sense of international trade, in the sense of maritime law. But we didn't recognise that. No one got the memo that happened. And so it happened right before our eyes, but totally in the background. And so organisations that were never like that started changing their nature. And now we just get fines and fees and penalties for absolutely everything. And we know it's wrong and it doesn't make sense and it's bullshit and we reject it wholly and all of these things. But deep down we're like, what do I do? When did this happen? How did this... What's wrong with this world? These are things that we say and hear people say all the time. And it's the X factor of the matrix. It's people don't see how we got to this place because it's the nature of being in illusion. Illusion is your reality until you see through it. It's not an illusion until you recognise it as such. It's your reality before that. And so our reality has been changing over decades, over hundreds of years. And no one was given the Dakota Key to see that something new had happened. And so now we're just looking at all of the results of a thing that had happened, not understanding why. And so we're very disempowered because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to respond. And I think as we found the Dakota Key for the matrix. And the word is corporate. The word is contract. The word is business. The key to all of this is that every single entity and person that you're looking at right now is business oriented and contract oriented. And it's just that they weren't at some stage. Within your generation, it's always been like that. But I tip just over the edge where it wasn't like that, Our oldies, our grandparents, they didn't come from this space. It worked really differently, That's why people talk about the good old days.
Yeah, when
They're-
life was simpler.
They're talking
Yeah.
about a world of living status,
Yeah.
of common law, of living men and women getting on with it and dealing with each other, and not being dealt with or dealt to. It wasn't always like that, but now there's really no other way. You couldn't imagine it, where people are at the top of the food chain, and that governments and creations and organisations are are rungs under us, and that is still true today. It was true yesterday, it will be true tomorrow. Our living status is what trumps all other jurisdictions, and it is just so simple that your living status is first and foremost, because it is what is created first. It's what was created by the Creator. Everything else is our stuff. We did all of that, it's totally changeable. And to think that any of that stuff we've created is or could be above us is mental.
It is, yeah. It is, yeah. Absolutely. It can't be because we've created it. Something you create cannot have power.
Over its creator.
Doesn't work like that.
It cannot. And this is the thing about folks, I guess, that have lost their connection to the Creator, that don't have a relationship with God, don't have a sense of God in their heart, or even a contextual idea of that, a conceptual idea. When you don't have God, you're missing a very key context in your life, which says that you are not the apex, that you come from something, that you come from somewhere, and something or somewhere that is greater than yourself, and that you may not answer to it, but there is a form of accountability with it. And that is our conscience. That's simple. That's God's voice within all of us that says right and wrong, yes and no, and all living beings know right from wrong. But when we disconnect from all of that, we lose our sense of that. And so when God goes back into the background, suddenly it's just us. I am God. I am the creator. I am the master creator of all things. I manifest all things. And it's a recipe for disaster.
It gets dangerous because it's like the ego just running the whole entire world.
Yep.
And it's one of the first things that the communists try and push on whoever they're teaching, that there is no God.
So you can do what you want.
So, yeah.
There's no accountability on the inside.
No
when
wonder.
No one's looking, do what you like.
No wonder communism is so dangerous with that kind of concept.
And this is the concept we're all running by now. It's communism is contract. It is corporate. It's all the same mentality, which says I can do what I want and I'll protect myself with money. And that's been going on forever and ever, hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And once you're starting to protect your dodgy nature with money, and you find others doing the same, it builds quite a rat's nest, because you're protected, and it just allows the worst of our natures, the worst of human natures, to go unchecked and to completely thrive in a protected environment. And you times that on a global level by a couple of 100 years, then it's not surprising that we've got the situation that we've got at the moment. And it's just rat's nest on top of rat's nest, because it's been allowed to be that way right in front of our faces. And we just didn't connect or realise or know what to do. But money has enabled that to be that way. Because if money wasn't protecting me, I'm still exposed to you as my brother. If I'm not better than you, which money enables me to think, if I'm not in control of all things, which money enables me to think, if I'm not buffered from you, which money enables me to think, well, I'm still accountable to you. I'm still looking you in the eye and going, right, we need to talk. Money stops all of that, and contract law is the foundation to make money the ruling party, make money the ruling force. And that's not to say that currency or any form of exchange tools are a bad thing, but you need to come at it with a context that there is a right and wrong way to use it. And if you don't have a sense of right or wrong, all of your wrong bits are just going to mess it up entirely because you're not doing it for the right reasons and you know it. You could be doing it for disastrous reasons and not know it. What a fuck up.
That's about it.
A lot of evidence of that today. You can just see it is just out of control. And the people with the most power, which really means the most money, are wholly unchecked. And they have been unchecked because of that buffer that's been bought with money. It's not really power, it's total false power. But in the same sense, that money has created that buffer of protection where until you really see through that, you're not going to get to any of those individuals. Common law still has money. Common law can still operate in all of those tools and use all of that stuff. You can still run a business, you can still trade, still do all of that stuff. But I guess the thing is, common law is still one step forward from natural law, which is us under the Creator, which to me simply means that your conscience is on, that the green light is on and it's operating, meaning that you work from that feeling space, that there are things that I can do that are right and there's things that I can do that are wrong. And wrong has consequences even if no one's looking. You don't have God, you don't have that.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible to understand natural law fully and completely without having that relationship.
You cannot. It is simply impossible. You can't be at the apex of all things and relate to others as equals. You can't think that you are just the top of the pile and still feel equality with other brothers and sisters. It's not possible. You're going to be separate from or think that you're better than. God equalises all of us. You know, once you're under something that we're all accountable to, we all have that in common. And you might call that the fear of God, but that's just the glass half empty way of looking at it. Like, it is a check and a balance, no doubt about it, but it's totally for our well-being. Like, if you follow it, like, goodness ensues. That's the whole point. It's not a way to keep you penalised. It's a positive as long as you're following that sense of conscience, following that sense of right doing with each other.
Absolutely. And if you live your life by that, you can come to a point of peace. And that's the whole idea, is that's where we want to be. That's where we want the whole entire world to be, at peace.
Yep.
Because now, man, it's crazy.
And there can only be equality at the base of that peace. You can't have power differences and authority and people over other people in any way, shape or form and have peace. The minute one person is below another or above another, you're in strife.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and that is a godless environment as I know it in my heart.
Yeah.
You can only have levels of people without God in the room. Because God is the leveller. God says, no, I'm sorry, you're all the same under me.
Yeah, we're all equal.
We're all equal.
Yeah.
And you need that contextual reference point to equalise us. If you don't have it, you're not going to follow that way. You're going to be all about yourself.
And I think that's why a big reason why it does bring you to a point of peace is because we are all on that level. And it's like, why would you want to hurt anyone or do anything wrong to a brother or sister when we're all equals? We're all here to support each other and look after each other. So why would you want to do any wrong?
Exactly.
And that's really where we all need to come to.
And distribution of wealth will show you that a certain small number of people have such a ridiculous amount of wealth, where from a place of equality, if that ridiculous amount of wealth was spread equally across the planet, there wouldn't be one person suffering or missing out in any way. Like whoever you decided to redistribute that wealth equally, no one would really be penalised. No one would be missing out, you know. You don't need a few $1 billion in the bank. Like, you just don't, you know. you need what you need. And it might be nice to have a smidge more, but a couple of billion in the bank ain't a smidge more.
No, absolutely not.
Know? And to redistribute that is the whole point, is that no one will lose. If we really came back to a place of equality, it's not a space to fear. You know, it's just that got to hang on. It's that possessive nature, which is self-interest.
And it's a fear-based mentality too, because if you got to accumulate that much, like why do you need to accumulate billions? Are you scared of losing it? Like, are you scared of losing something, or is it
protecting yourself from something?
You're protecting yourself from something. Like, why? Like, I feel like we should all really just be helping each other out, like wherever we can, because that's what we're all here for.
Collaboration is key.
Yeah.
That's where you see the true remedy, isn't it? With people without anything at all getting together for a common idea or a common good, and you look at the brilliance and the beauty that comes out of those relationships and those partnerships, and it had nothing to do with how much money one or both people brought to the situation. It was just the spirit of willingness and the willingness to share and to co-create. you know, for us to have, not just you to have and me to have, but to do that together. Yeah, man, maritime law has just smashed the concept of that. And it's, you know, the boundary ends with you. It's just all about yourself. And you can only really gain so much with that, you know. You might gain a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of possessions, but it's not going to get you through at the end of the day, man. It's not going to keep you happy because you're going to be defending it for the rest of the time.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean anything really. Like, possessions are just possessions. Like, they're good to have, don't get me wrong. Like, they're fun. Like, you can have mad cars, bikes, whatever. That's all. That's great. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that at all. But they're only possessions. That's it. What we really need to focus on is like things with meaning and relationships and people and things with depth, not just accumulating things, because I think it's kind of the wrong way to look at it.
Do you think you could maintain that depth and that true sense of partnership and collaboration and still massively accumulate? Like, to me, it almost nulls it out. It almost cancels it out. Because the minute you're working with other people, it just doesn't feel right to mass accumulate next to everyone else. Yeah,
well, you kind of feel like, what's the need? Like, what for? Like, wouldn't we just... If you see someone who's having a bad time, it's like, man, come here, like, come over, have a scrub or have a feed, whatever. Like, we'll help you out. It's all good. That's sort of where I'm at. That's how I feel about it. To massively accumulate, it's like, what for? Is it an ego-driven thing? Is it all it is to accumulate?
It isolates you, doesn't it? It isolates you from people, and you sort of self-isolate to protect and defend your pile. But it isolates you from people without the same pile because they don't feel equal. They can't relate in the same way. Like, that money really is like a chasm, a bit of a moat around yourself. And so it has to be ego, which is just me. Ego is the I, the grand I, and it ends at the end of me. And so that's the moat. You know, that's not equality. There's no partnership or collaboration when you're building a wall around yourself. Even if it's to make yourself look more awesome, it doesn't improve partnership at all. It only hurts collaboration. And so we've got to start winding back this idea of individuality back to interdependence and back to one us again.
Back to us.
Back to us and that sense of us-ship. And we all know that in our hearts, you know, and some of us go, I remember back in the day, you know, when it was simpler, and that's what we're referring to, when there was more of a sense of us-ship. But it ain't gone anywhere. Like, you've still got a heartbeat. You've still got us-ship in your heart. And now more than ever, to find us is key. And there's such a division in the world right now that it's not only imperative, it's also a lot easier, because there's a lot of us just still programmed and tripping in their own way and fully in that illusion still. But there are a lot of people who aren't. And to find us now is wonderful, and it's so much easier. It's just that look in someone's eye. First couple of minutes of conversation, you can tell when someone's present on the us ship. Willing to work, willing to share, willing to give, willing to listen, willing to receive. All of those things, like, they're all those qualities that really come from the true heart of us. And it doesn't take much to get back to it, but we've got to start finding each other. And it's such a good opportunity for leadership now, you know, especially in this time, to find each other, to revision, to regroup, to re-galvanise, to move forward again. And anyone not with that program can really just stay with whatever program they're on. But I think fighting it at this point is really kind of futile. Like, the strength is simply remembering our power source, and we remember that together when we come back, when two or more gather in the name. When two or more remind each other, we go, oh, that's right, we're together. And then a third one comes in and you are off and running.
Exactly.
And then you get a whole group of you, and the possibilities are endless. You know, you have so much potential of what you can achieve. And you might not achieve the same as having $1 billion in your own pocket, but the type of achievement will be 100 times more fulfilling, so much more satisfying. You'll actually feel what you've done in your last days, you know, not just sitting on how much stuff you got.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about, man. You want to look back on that quality, that richness, that it was worth it.
Yeah.
All my work got me something. The fruit that I produced was worth it. Who got to eat that fruit was worth it. Not just, not how much you accumulated.
Yeah, exactly. And even the whole thing of fighting it, like fighting the system or whatever, it's like, what are you fighting?
You can't.
Really? Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing to fight. We're dealing with a business.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's step 2, though, you know. Like, the first step is to become aware of all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And to go, bullshit, and to get good and angry about it.
Absolutely.
And to recognise the
there.
injustice of it, to recognise that it's wrong, to recognise it's false, to recognise people are being hurt. Like, no part of that's cool beans. Like, it's fair and okay to have
It's
a good
righteous
rage of that
anger
for a while. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
But at some point, if you've got to realise that that's not going to solve your problem. There's no remedy.
There's no remedy
just
there.
raging against the machine.
Yeah.
Because the machine don't care. The machine is dead. It's not going to hear really anything that you're saying. And so the only way forward is positivity. The only way forward is to regroup and find who you're with, find what you do, find what you're up to and get on with it. Don't worry about the rest of that stuff, you know. Disengage, start winding back as much as you can. It's not the world for us, man, that false illusionary world. It's not the way forward,
Nah.
And it's such an opportunity now for us to find each other and to find us and to start rebuilding, to start revisioning new things. The potential for enterprise is at an all-time high. That's
that to me is exciting. It's like, let's start from the ground up and let's rebuild and let's do some awesome stuff.
Right on, brother.
Yeah. Well, that's been quite another epic yarn.
Good job.
From the name to us.
The name to us.
Until next week.
See you next week.
Rock and roll.
On you, mate.